The time is 2 p.m. You're watching the Monday edition of Market View right here on Eswatini TV. My name is Nonselesi Tole and welcome to the program. Today we speak with the American Spaces and Experiential Learning Coordinator at the U.S. Embassy on cultivating leadership and community empowerment through U.S. government exchange programs. As global partnerships are shaping new pathways for young professionals, such initiatives play a rather critical role in connecting Eswatini's emerging changemakers with transformative educational and professional experiences in the U.S. The recent introduction of the $12,000 U.S. government exchange program's alumni grant marks an expansion of opportunities for alumni to implement high-impact projects here in the kingdom. We'll unpack the strategy and expected impact behind this major investment in national development. But first, our business stories for the day. In our business stories, we begin with this. The government total expenditure is projected to grow by 8.5% to 32.61 billion emalangeni this year, driven by wage adjustments in the security forces, the recent salary review and infrastructure spending. Speaking during the 2025 Annual Financial Stability Review at the Central Bank Complex in Eswatini, the Governor, Dr. Philip Nisi, stated that this year the deficit is projected to reach 2.88 billion emalangeni.
The fiscal position remains a central area of systemic concern. Revenue performance is still highly sensitive to SACU fluctuations. Total revenue projected to rise to 29.73 billion in 2025-2026 from 27.6 billion in 2024-25, a growth of 7.7%. While SACU receipts are expected to decline sharply by 20.4% to 10.4 billion, intensifying fiscal pressure. Total expenditure is projected to grow by 8.5% to 32.61 billion, driven by wage adjustments in the security forces, the recent salary review, and infrastructure spending. As a result, the fiscal deficit is projected to widen to 2.88 billion, or 3% of GDP, from 2.46 billion in 2026-2025. Persistent deficit continue to erode contingency buffers, increase borrowing needs, and elevate sovereign liquidity risks with potential spillovers to the banking sector. The Revenue Stabilization Fund provides short-term relief, though its impact remains temporary. The non-renewal of AGOA could adversely affect Eswatini's manufacturing sector, particularly textiles and apparel. Although exports via AGOA account are less than 10%, trade shocks may reduce foreign currency inflows, amplifying exchange rate and liquidity pressures within the financial system. This underscores the need for accelerated diversification into sectors such as agro-processing, renewable energy, and ICT, as well as deeper engagement with African trade markets to mitigate external vulnerabilities. We need to start thinking strategically how we drive the export sector so that we can draw and generate foreign exchange, starting with SMEs, instead always relying on foreign direct investment. Public debt rose to 40.3% of GDP by June 2025, up from 38.6% in June 2024. Domestic debt increased to 21.6% from 19.7% of GDP, while external debt declined marginally to 18.7% from 18.9%. This upward debt trajectory elevates a rollover and interest rate risks and may crowd out private sector credit, especially given financing needs for major infrastructure projects, including the Puzumoya oil reserve. Latest figures indicate that public debt stood at 39% of GDP in October 2025. The credit to GDP gap improved from minus 7.71 in June 2024 to 5.29 in June 2025. Although this is still negative, the narrowing indicates a gradual strengthening of credit relative to economic activity. However, risks remain tilted to the upside. Imported inflation driven by geopolitical tensions, global supply disruptions, and climate shocks continue to strain household purchasing power.
In other news, domestically, pension assets soared to 26.6 billion Malangeni, marking a strong 12.8% increase. The portfolios continue to show healthy diversification across debt, securities, equities, collective investment schemes, property deposits, and other investment instruments. These impressive figures were revealed by the Governor of the Central Bank of Eswatini, Dr. Philip Nisi, during his annual Financial Stability Review presentation.
The governor has said the pension and retirement fund sectors remain a cornerstone of financial stability.
Total pension assets rose from 50.1 billion to 55.8 billion between June 2024 and June 2025, 11.4% increase, reflecting the sector's role in long-term service mobilization. Liquidity remains limited, with short-term investments at 8.4% of total assets, whilst exposure to banks and other NBFIs declined slightly. Equity holdings increased to 6.5%, property exposure fell to 12.1%, and bond allocations remained stable. Pension assets now represent 57.1% of GDP and 34.4% of total financial sector assets, underscoring their systemic significance in our economy. Domestically, pension assets reached 26.6 billion, up by 12.8%, with portfolios diversified across debt securities, equities, collective investment schemes, property deposits, and other instruments. The remaining 29.2 billion is held on foreign assets and is heavily concentrated in equities, which is about 94.7%. Geographically, pension fund investments remain well balanced, with 40% allocated domestically, 44.5% within the CMA region, and 15.5% offshore.
Dr. Mnisi has also given an update on financial markets assets under management by investment advisors and fund managers.
Increased from 34.8 billion in June 2024 to 41 billion in June 2025, a 17.7% increase. This growth reflects stronger global and regional market performance, supported by elevated gold prices, persistent inflation, and central bank demand for safe haven assets like gold, whilst improved Johannesburg Stock Exchange performance also contributed. Collective investment schemes accounted for approximately 9.4 billion, or 22.9% of total assets. The Eswatini Stock Exchange remains a small but active market with 9 listed entities. All-share index showed relative stability but declined 3.4% year-on-year, largely due to a 25.5% drop in one major firm and low trading volumes. Market capitalization fell 3.8% to 6.7 billion, with the top 2 firms representing over half of the total value, reflecting concentration risks. Equity turnover rose to 31.7 million. Yet activity remains sporadic, highlighting limited market depth and liquidity.
The governor has said banks increased holdings of government securities by 13.6%, now accounting for 56.4% of total liquid assets, reflecting the persistent sovereign bank nexus. He stated that key liquid ratios strengthened. Liquid assets to deposits rose from 30.9% in June last year to 32%, and liquid assets to total assets increased from 22.5% to 23% by June this year. Reporting, Nelson Dlangamandla, Vuminkosi Nzinisa, Ezulwini.
And that is your business brief this afternoon. We're in conversation with the U.S. Embassy immediately after this. Stay tuned.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Welcome back. You are still watching Market View. Onto this now. The U.S. Embassy in Eswatini has announced a new 204,000 Emalangeni alumni grant aimed at empowering local innovators, community leaders and young professionals who have benefited from U.S. government exchange programs. The initiative was unveiled at the American Corner in Mbabane, where Charge d'Affaires Mark Weinstock reaffirmed the U.S. mission's commitment to supporting emerging talent and strengthening civic participation across the country. We're now joined by the Embassy's American Spaces and Experiential Learning Coordinator, Sakile Shabangu, to speak on what this funding means for Eswatini's growing network of exchange program alumni and how it could shape the future of community development projects in the country. Sakile, how are you doing?
Fine, thanks, my sister. How are you doing?
Good, good. Glad to have you in the studio. So let's get to it.
Yeah.
Can you explain or unpack the core purpose of the U.S. government exchange programs and how they're actually designed, to, contribute or shape Eswatini's long-term human capital development?
Yeah, appreciate that's a very good question. I think let's first start off with saying Eswatini right now probably has a database of 1,000 plus alumni that have participated in U.S. programs. So we have a variety of programs. You've got the Hubert Humphrey Fellowship, you've got the Fulbright, you've got the Mandela Washington Fellowship. I got to be a beneficiary of that one in 2021, actually.
Nice.
You've got PALIP, you've got Yale, you've got IVLP, so many of these programs that have really brought forward a lot of emerging and strong voices in the country to basically be exposed to what is happening out there in the world, specifically in the US, but also just networking them with other Africans to see how initiatives back home can be scaled up, how they can tap into different grants and opportunities and training so that they can come back here and sort of feed into that. And if you really think about it, if you look at the landscape right now, the context, we have quite the movers and shakers that have participated in the program. Just to think about a few, I believe the Prime Minister is actually an alumni of one of the U.S. programs that we have. People like Your Courtesy, Tamsanga, Mosaic, the producer, a couple of others. I believe Bertha Stolle, also a very strong force, who's the chairperson of the U.S. Exchange Programs Alumni Committee that we have since, or association that we have since granted this award for them to take up what they have learned to basically give back to the community.
You are naming familiar faces for me. These
absolutely.
are movers and shakers, as you say.
Yes, movers and shakers.
You're a beneficiary yourself. Perhaps you could just give us a picture of what actually goes on during these programs, because we've heard of, you know, a selected number of Eswatini going to the US, they come back, and then what?
Yeah, I mean, it varies from program to program, but what I got to participate in is the Mandela Washington Fellowship, YALI program. Basically 6 weeks in the US with other African leaders in the continent, and basically being merged in institutes that are aligned to what you have a passion in. I was specifically attached to the leadership and civic engagement track, so I was at the oh goodness, I was in, I'll remember, but basically what we got to do there is just participate with other African young professionals and got to understand how the US is doing things. And together as a whole also, we got to form a network where we were saying, these are things that we need to take back home, and this is what we need to do when we come back. And I believe when I came back, I'm not sure about being a mover and shaker, but I did come back, and, you know, we're still pushing and still, you know, sort of looking at how we can continue to empower the youth in the country from different segments. Exactly, that's what it is.
Fair enough. Now, when you look at the country's civic and, you know, developmental landscape, what would you say then informed the introduction of this 204,000 Emalangeni alumni grant?
Sure. I mean, it's problems or issues that have been repeated over and over and over again. Challenges that obviously touch on the socio-economic status of the country, primarily looking at young people, right? And if you're looking at the young people that we have, we're also talking about a country that has quite the youth bulge, young people that are in need of resources, that are faced with unemployment issues and so many other issues. And I guess this is just basically a drop in the ocean, yes, but it is something that is supposed to also assist in moving the needle.
Right.
The grant will be focusing on primarily just 4 thematic areas. There's one that is going to be focusing on entrepreneurship, which is a big thing. We've seen the Ministry of Commerce also speaking about how we need to continue to uplift entrepreneurs, get them to scale up, get them to grow big so that they can continue to benefit, to contribute in the benefit of the country. So it's going to be that entrepreneurship track, focusing primarily or mostly with young entrepreneurs, folks that have just started their businesses, to sort of help them using a curriculum that has been used by the US. Actually, we used it for another alumni program called the Academy of Women Entrepreneurs. It's called Dream Builder. So it's a program that has been used for the longest time. It's meant to really shape the leader and, you know, how can you be better in terms of scaling your business and looking at other aspects that are very important for your business. So that's one of the thematic tracks. The alumni themselves are actually going to be running these programs because, like, again, 1,000+ database ultimately means you've got a whole lot of them that are in the same space. And it's really a moment for them to then give back to the same community of young people so that they can also learn. And it should have that domino effect ultimately. It's a mentorship sort of thing, which is the ethos of most US programs. It's the networking, it's the coming together, it's the community and having that ecosystem of young people working together. There's another one that is going to be focusing on STEM mentorship. STEM is a very big thing right now. In actual fact, I believe her name is... forgive me if I'm butchering her name, but I believe her name is Sanel Siwe, the lady pilot from... Yes, she's currently participating in a U.S. Program as well. But it's folks like that then are, you know, sort of we're going to work with to sort of help other young people to identify these STEM careers that they can also sort of come into and sort of see with their inspiration. I believe there's also sports diplomacy for leadership. Sports is an untapped, not necessarily untapped, but there's not a lot of conversation that is happening from a leadership front when it comes to sports. So this grant is also going to be helping with that, sort of bringing together people in the sports fraternities to have a conversation on how other young people can come into that space and more so also get to sort of look at how it is commercialized, because that's where we need to eventually go into. I think lastly, the grant is also meant to also bring together these alumni to sort of continue having a conversation about how they can continue to benefit their different communities here. So again, it's that, you know, multiplier and domino effect that we're sort of looking at. But more than anything, tasking the same alumni, you've participated in these programs, you're here, let's see how you can continue to make big strides in your different communities.
Right. I'd like for us to wrap it up now. But when you think long term, as the embassy, how do you then envision this grant contributing, you know, to a self-sustaining alumni ecosystem in the country?
Yeah, great question. The more people that have participated in the same programs come together, the more ideas will actually come together, the more they will continue to sort of network and sort of brainstorm, and that's what we're hoping this will do. They're coming together more often so that other things can actually be identified, and also tapping into other grant opportunities that are outside of the U.S. mission that they can also tap into. And also, again, the multiplier effect, continuing to work with other young people out there on the ground.
Right. Sakile, thank you very much for your time. That was Sakile Shabango from the US Embassy in Eswatini talking to us about the new 204,000 Malangeni alumni grant that is actually aimed at empowering local innovators and our young leaders in the country. Thematic areas include entrepreneurship, STEM mentorship, sports diplomacy rather, and of course network alumni impact for those that have benefited previously. Now we'll go for a net break. In a minute, we'll be speaking to our in-house economist, Sanele Sibia. Stay tuned.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.za.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
Welcome back now for our market analysis segment. In-house economist Sanele Sibia joins us virtually. Mr. Sibia, always a pleasure to have you with us. So, first trading day for the week, and I believe there's a mounting anticipation for a third rate cut this week. What's your observation of things?
Thank you, Notsile. Good afternoon to you and also to the viewer. Yes, so markets are anticipating that the Feds will cut the interest rate this week. We saw data coming in last week, the PCE, which is the preferred measure for inflation, and the jobs data the week earlier in the week. It just came out to show that the signals remain very strong to show that the Feds will cut interest rates come this week. And so we're seeing that they're playing into the the numbers with the Dow Jones Industrial Average up 104 points in today's trade. The Nasdaq Composite Index up 72 points in today's trade. And the S&P 500 there staying up at that 13 points as well, because we're anticipating that the Feds will cut interest rate, and that's going to boost demand, more especially amongst the risky stocks. And then coming into the European markets, what we're seeing today is London and France are somewhat showing signs of subdued activity. That's because we are waiting for the Bank of London to also come up and tell us what they're going to do this week in terms of the interest rates. But there are a bit of those inflation fears there. But in Germany, we've seen quite a positive uptake. We're back on the 24,000 mark. So today, then the markets were up 41 points in Frankfurt, largely driven by that and that expected demand therefore from China. And we've heard that the Chinese government will also be, floating some stimulus to make sure that there is even more demand coming in the year to come next year. And then coming into Asia, the Nikkei and the Shanghai Composite Index are showing some signs of improvements. The Nikkei is staying above the 50,000 mark, and the Shanghai Composite Index back on the 3,900 mark, hoping that it's going to go back to that 4,000 mark as we see this interest rate cut coming into effect this week. So what the markets are reacting to here in Japan and also in China is the fact that we're expecting the Feds to cut the interest rate this week, and also we're expecting those the Chinese government to detail what those stimulus are going to be, while we're seeing Hong Kong there just waiting, just lagging behind, waiting to see how the markets, especially the tech sector, is going to respond to all of this. And then also this signals and points to the property market weaknesses within Hong Kong. Coming into the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, earlier in the morning, we saw the Johannesburg Stock Exchange move back to that 111,000 mark. But, when you look at intraday trade, it had lost somewhat of some 833 points there, largely being pulled down by that downward, ascension of the price in gold. And then in Eswatini, we've not seen any changes in the Eswatini Stock Exchange. Gold has lost a bit of some points in today's trade, but remaining very high on that $4,233.90 per barrel per ounce. And Brent crude has also just tapered down a bit but still remaining on those weekly highs at $63 per barrel. Now, that's largely driven by the fact that we're expecting the Feds to cut interest rate, and that makes, the gold relatively attractive compared to dollar-based equities, and the fact that the US dollar is relatively weaker these days as we're building up towards that interest rate cut. And then now coming into the currencies, Notsila, you realize that we are back at that 16.98 cents per dollar against the US dollar. That's largely driven by the fact that we're expecting the Feds to cut their interest rate, and gold continues to sparkle brighter, supporting the rand in that front. But we had seen it come back to that 16.98 towards midday. But earlier on in the day, we were at that 16.90 mark right on the dot. And then also against the euro, we were at lower levels, showing relative strength coming through from the dollar. Just a bit of weakness is coming through as we compare with the Japanese yen, largely driven by the fact that we do expect business to do well under the new administration in Japan. Thank you, Notsile.
Thank you very much, Sanele, for that analysis. That was in-house economist Sanele Subia sharing insights on today's trading day. Otherwise, this has been Market View from myself and the team. Thank you very much for your company. Until the next edition, take care.